Okay, so first things first. So these are the attendance passcodes for today. Um, it You might have to wait a couple of minutes before they will actually let you enter the passcode. But these are the passcodes. And in the meantime, I'm gonna take a couple of minutes to write a couple of things on board. Okay, so hopefully you were you all able to get attendance using the okay good. Okay, okay. So the original plan for today was to get into was to get into talking about this thing talking about what's going on in utilitarian in chapter 3 of utilitarianism. But as I was writing this thing, I suddenly realized that there is something that that we didn't really talk about on Tuesday that we probably should spend a little bit of time talking about. Uh, okay, hold on a second. And that is that you might recall that on Tuesday there was some there was some objections to utilitarianism that we were talking about. One of the objections was the objection that utilitarianism demands too much of humanity. Uh, and the other objection is that the other objection is that utilitarianism is not is not feasible because nobody can really become happy, and that becoming virtuous is more important. There is one other objection that we never actually got to talking about, and that is the one that says that I'm going to just put it here. Uh, so there were three objections. If you might remember, we went through objections 2, and 3. But the first objection was the one that we never really talked about, and the first objection is that it is degrading. It is degrading to to see pleasure. To see pleasure as the highest goal of good for humanity. Okay, so why is it degrading? So there are, during Mill's time, there were people who criticized Mill by saying that, this is degrading. Okay, it's probably too small. It is degrading to see pleasure as the highest good for humanity, because, because there are all kinds of there are all kinds of animals that also experience pleasure. Pigs and all that, and all kinds of animals experience pleasure. So if pleasure is something that we share in common with animals, and if pleasure is supposed to be the highest good for humanity, then that would imply that we are no better than animals, which sounds degrading indeed. So what is Mill's or how does Mill respond? What is Mill's response to this objection? Okay. Does anyone remember what would Mill say? Or how does Mill respond to this objection? Matt?
He says that there was like higher pleasures and lower base pleasures, and all animals have like base pleasure, but like food and sleeping, but like humans also have the pleasure of like making art and caring for other people.
Yeah. So thanks. Good point. Yeah. So Mill's response, right, is that well, the pleasures that humans are capable of experiencing is not the same as the pleasures that animals are capable of experiencing. We are capable of experiencing what he calls certain higher pleasures than animals are capable of. Okay, so what are the higher pleasures? Okay, Matt has mentioned a couple. Making art is one of them. Uh, Maybe caring for other people is also one of them. Certain other, maybe I think Mill talks about certain other things that employ your so-called higher faculties, intellectual faculties, doing philosophy, maybe. So yeah, so the idea here is that they are okay. So how okay? The question is, how do we know? How do we know that? How do we know what are the higher pleasures and what are the lower pleasures? Um, Maybe one way to do it is by comparison, right? You don't see animals making art. You also don't see. Okay, animals do take care of their own time, but you don't see animals. Mm, you don't see them doing philosophy. You don't see them um, getting into debates about this or that or whatever. Uh, so maybe you can kind of do it, you can say, okay, these are the higher pleasures because they are, they are things that humans do that you don't see animals doing. Um, uh, Okay, but here's another question. So even if there are all these higher pleasures, why are they? I mean, why exactly are they higher pleasures? They're not. They can't just be higher pleasures because we do them and animals don't. Um, I mean, how? Why are they pleasures? Mill has this very interesting text. His text is this. He says, in order to know that something is a higher pleasure, you need to, you need to approach people. You need to talk to people who have experienced both the higher and the lower pleasures. And if a higher pleasure is something that people who have experienced both kinds would prefer. And so in a group of Suppose in a group of in this class, right? If you ask everybody in this class, would you prefer to do art, or would you prefer to have a lot of good food? Um, and if everybody or most people in this classroom say that they prefer to do art, then doing art is to be preferred and is a higher pleasure than indulging in a lot of good food. Um, Okay, so that's what Mill says, right? Mill says that if actually, let me just read directly from what he says, because sometimes it's better to just actually see what it's to just actually read what it says and then go from there. Okay, so page 1073. Uh, uh, Near the top of the left-hand column on 1073. Okay, so the question is, what do I mean? What does he mean by a difference in quality of pleasures? What is the difference between higher and lower pleasures? And this is his answer. If I am asked what I mean by difference of quality in pleasures, or what makes one pleasure more valuable than another merely as a pleasure, except it's being greater in amount, there is but one possible answer. Of two pleasures, if there be one to which all or almost all who have experienced of both give a decided preference, irrespective of any feeling of moral obligation to prefer it, that is the more desirable pleasure. If one of the two is by those who are completely acquainted with both, placed so far above the other that they prefer it, even though knowing it to be attended with a greater amount of discontent, and would not resign it for any quantity of the other pleasure which their nature is capable of, we are justified in ascribing to the preferred enjoyment a superiority in quality so far outweighing quantity as to render it in comparison of small accounts. Okay, so there are actually two things going on. First thing is that uh, you interview all of the people who have experienced both kinds of pleasures. In this case, we are talking about making art versus eating lots of good food. And if both, right? If both, if all of the people who have, if all or most of the people who have experienced both prefer creating art, then creating art is a higher pleasure. Um, and if they prefer it, and this is the second point. The second point is that if they prefer it, even though they know that creating art is often accompanied by a lot of pain, a lot of displeasure, then you will also know that it's a higher pleasure. Because one of the characteristics, trademarks of a higher pleasure is that people do it and are willing to endure a lot of inconvenience or even discomfort in the course of doing it, because the end product, the sense of achievement is, the pleasure that comes from the sense of achievement at the end is so much greater, is so much greater and so much more powerful. Okay, I definitely agree with the second part. I mean, I definitely agree that when you are doing some kind of creative endeavor, whether it's creating art or trying to write something, maybe philosophy, or trying to play chess. And all of these things, right? All of these things are often accompanied by a lot of discomfort and this, a lot of maybe even pain. That I agree with that part. But the other part, the one about interviewing people, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, uh, if I were to go into any random group of people and ask them randomly, do you prefer to create art or do you prefer to eat lots of good food? I don't know what the answer would be. Mm, Maybe this is a. I should have done an anonymous poll before we started this whole thing. But okay, maybe it's not too late. This is not anonymous, so but try not to feel any pressure from my presence. Okay, so the question is, do you prefer to create art? Um, do you prefer to create art, or do you prefer to eat a lot of good food?
Food, definitely.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So it's like what's going on here? Okay. Um, who prefers to eat a lot of food over art? Okay, I'm not complete, but it seems like at least half the class, probably more. Okay, thank you. Okay. Um, so maybe eating food is a higher pleasure than creating art. Hmm. Sometimes okay, maybe I should ask you another question. Um, because I remember Mill said that uh, in order to have a fair test, you have to ask people who have had experience of both. Um, so those of you who voted for food, are you voting for food because because you have only experienced good food but not great art, or are you voting for it because you have experienced both and still prefer food anyway? Okay, the one with the purple face mask. Sorry, what is your name?
Eli.
Eli. Okay, Eli. I think you are one of the people who voted for food. I mean on that. Are you voting for food because I'm not supposed to vote now, but okay. Are you voting for food because because you've never experienced creating great art, or creating, it doesn't have to be great art, just art. Are you voting for food because you have only experienced the pleasure of food and not art, or are you voting for food because you have experienced both and you still prefer food anyway?
I've experienced both. I think my experiences with food have been better.
Hmm. I see. Is it better because uh, is it better because you feel that you haven't had that much success in art?
Probably.
I see. Hmm. Yeah. Uh, do you have any? Okay, maybe I'm starting to wonder if maybe art is not such a good example. Do you have any let's see, any hobbies or things that you like to do that that can take up so much of your attention that you sometimes forego food in order to do it?
Yeah, I'd say watching baseball or playing baseball.
I see. Okay. Um, so maybe playing. So if you are able, so if you are willing to watch baseball, at least sometimes, to such an extent that you are willing to go hungry for a little bit, because of it, then perhaps watching baseball or playing baseball is a higher pleasure. Hmm. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know, maybe food. Yeah, okay, so maybe art is not such a good example, I just realized, because, not all of us are artists. But yeah, perhaps what you're saying is that if you can think of one hobby or pastime that takes up so much of your mental energy or attention that you sometimes forego food because of that, then maybe that is the higher pleasure.
Question. So, would it be incorrect to compare these hobbies to food because food is also a base pleasure, like animals use as an assistance? Or would you want to compare it more so like baseball to like football rather than baseball playing?
Oh, okay. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think food. Mill is definitely not saying. Okay, Mill is definitely not saying that. He's not saying that that we humans are so different from animals that we can just live on baseball alone and not food. That's crazy, right? I don't think you actually say that. Well, what he's saying is that it's something like this. We are like animals in one sense because we need food just like them. But in order for us to live a fully satisfying life, we need more than food. Man does not live on bread alone, right? In addition to bread or food, we also need other things. Other things like maybe baseball or chess or whatever that fulfills your, he calls it your higher nature, your higher faculties, and that's probably correct. Later in the semester, we are going to read some Marx, and Marx has an even stronger opinion about this. Marx believes that we humans have this. It is in our essence to want to do creative things. We have. It is part of. He calls it species essence. It is part of our species essence to want to create. So whether it's creating art or whether it is, I think there is a sense in which enjoying baseball is a kind of creation as well, because you are creating something, you are creating something wonderful with your mind. Uh, so so people like Marx, and in this case, would say that being human is different from being non-human, because being human, we need more to be satisfied, and that more would involve employing your higher faculties or doing something creative, as Marx would say. So I mean, some people, some people are uneasy with the idea of, with Marx. Some people they are uneasy with this idea of a species essence, because they think that it is strange to say that humans have any kind of essence. But maybe don't worry too much about that right now. The general idea again is that we humans are capable of more than just fulfilling certain basic needs like food. You were saying something earlier about football versus baseball. I didn't really catch that part. Do you mind repeating that?
Oh, I was just saying since like sports would be considered a higher pleasure. You don't see animals going out and playing sports, but you do see them eating. So would like comparing those higher pleasures compared to like basic pleasures.
Right. So the question is maybe what is the difference between the higher pleasures and the base pleasures?
Like, can you compare the higher against the base, or should you just compare the higher?
Yeah, I think Mill actually wants to say that there's a sense in which they are not comparable, because he says at some point that people will continue to make art or do all these creative things, even even if it causes them discomfort or pain or inconvenience. So it may be right, like with somebody like Van Gogh, he lived in poverty for so many years. He could barely even fulfill his basic needs, and yet he continued to make art. So it may be that, it may be that those two are not comparable because if they are comparable, if they are comparable, then then you're sooner or later you're gonna you'll find yourself making a calculation, right? You will say, okay, I only get so many units of pleasure from making art, and if making art is causing me so much pain, I'm actually not getting any pleasure at all. So I should stop making art. I should just devote myself to eating. Uh, but Van Gogh doesn't do that, and we know many other cases of people who don't do that, who continue to do the thing that causes them discomfort. So what that must suggest is that the the, 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 the the thing that you get from making art, whether it is you can call it a different kind of pleasure, or you can call it achievement or whatever it is, the thing that you get from making art must be of a different, it must be a different category of achievement from the feeling that you get from eating food. Um, yeah, so the two things they must be basically incomparable. Uh, mm, uh, yeah, which is why because if they were comparable, then you're at some point you're going to start calculating and say, well, I should give up this or for that. So yeah, it's really very interesting. Because if you think about it, uh, yeah, I think that a lot of classical economic theory actually makes a basic mistake this way, because it's been a while since I read any real economics, but the classical economic theory always says that humans are beings that that naturally want to satisfy all their desires, naturally want to satisfy all their desires and get as much pleasure as possible. But if that's all there is to being a human being, then Van Gogh wouldn't exist. Then lots of people who make great art or great creative achievements wouldn't exist, because then if all there is to human life is about maximizing pleasure, or if it's all just about maximizing pleasure, then there will be no reason to do anything that causes a lot of discomfort and doesn't offer you any kind of tangible payoff. So it's, yeah, it's really interesting. The thing is this, right? The other thing that I'm wondering about is this. So look at somebody like Van Gogh, or look at somebody, yeah, anybody who does something creative and is able to, and is willing to endure a lot of pain or discomfort for that. You can say, I think you can almost say that these people they're not really maximizing happiness or maximizing pleasure, right? So if they are not maximizing pleasure or maximizing happiness, well, then there are two problems now. First problem is that we have at least a small group of human beings who are not driven by maximizing happiness or maximizing pleasure. And the second problem is that if there is a small group of humans who are not driven who are not driven to maximize happiness, then why? Why should humans in general, why should people like you and me maximize happiness? I mean, remember that when Mill talks about maximizing happiness, he's not just talking about maximizing your own happiness. He's also talking about maximizing general happiness, maximizing the happiness of yourself and other people. And which brings me to this question, why? Why should I promote the general happiness? Why not just promote my own happiness and ignore others? Or if you are Van Gogh, why not just do whatever creative thing you want to do, art or whatever, and just ignore everything else? Why should I promote the general happiness? Um, the more general question here is why be moral? Um, so you'll see that this is a question that pops up. That pops up whenever we talk about any kind of moral theory. Whether it is utilitarianism or duty-based ethics or virtue ethics. Ultimately this question always pops up. Why you say that you tell me that I should do my duty. You tell me that I should promote general happiness. You tell me that I should be a virtuous person. But why? Why should I do it? Uh, the general answer to that question, I mean, different philosophers give different answers, but the general answer is always something like, you should do it because it makes you you. Okay, why? How does it make me me? Okay, let's look at Ming's answer first. It makes you you because I was going to go through all of these different things these different distinctions that he draws, but I'm just going to jump straight to this thing. It makes you you because being a human that has grown up in civilization, we have this natural social sentiment. We have this natural social feeling. Uh, Okay, it's not innate. I mean, there's a difference between natural and innate. You're not. I mean, I think most human beings are not born with social feelings. I don't think, because if you look at babies, right? Babies. I don't think babies share food with people. You actually have to teach. You actually have to teach babies to share food with other people. So babies are, you can say that babies are naturally selfish. But what happens is that as you are growing up, right, your parents teach you to, share stuff with people, and then you start to make friends in maybe the playground, and you realize that unless you want to be a bully, it is usually a good idea to try to take turns at the slide or something. And then you go to school and you realize that if you want to get around, if you want to get by well, you probably should share things with people. You probably should, consider other people's feelings before you do anything else. So the idea is that over time, as you're growing up, it becomes natural. It becomes natural for you to consider the feelings of other people when you are doing things. So in a sense, it is natural. It is a natural implanted feeling that is a social feeling. So Mill basically says, look, we should care about you have to care about the general happiness because because you can't really because you already are a social creature. You already are a social creature. You have already been brought up from a young age to care about the feelings of other people. So caring about the general happiness is kind of just a natural extension of that. Um, or actually, you can to put it another way, caring about the general happiness is actually just a how do I say this? It's actually a sort of it's actually an explanation. It's actually the foundation for why we have social feelings in the first place. Um, the idea is that you can't really tell a kid, if a kid who's like 3 or 4, who's just learning to get around the playground, you can't really tell him about general happiness because he's too young to be thinking about general happiness. Uh, but as he grows up, right, he starts to care about his social circle becomes bigger, so he starts to care about more and more, consider more and more people. Right, you start by considering people in the playground, and then you go to school and you consider your classmates, and then maybe you go to work and you consider people at work as well, and then maybe you have your own family and you consider your family members as well. So this circle becomes bigger and bigger. So in a sense, when we ask people to consider the general happiness, it's actually just a sort of natural extension of that. You know, the when we are the thinking about the general happiness of mankind is kind of just a natural extension of this, you know, broadening circle. You if you want to think about, if you think about people growing up, you know, and as your social circle becomes bigger and bigger, you are growing as a moral being. And so, you know, we are thinking about the general happiness is kind of the final step in that growth. It is the final step that makes you a fully fledged member of the human race, perhaps. So we should, according to me at least, you should care about the general happiness because it is because it's who you are, not in the sense of who you are born as, but in the sense of who you are evolving to become. You are evolving to become, you know, from a member of the playground to a member of the school, and then the workplace, and then society, and then finally the community of mankind, or humankind, if you want to put it that way. Okay, now here's something. I don't know how convincing is this answer, but you'll see that generally, and this is a bit of a generalization, but generally you can say that philosophers are kind of divided into two groups when it comes to this kind of question. So you have people like Mill who tells you, you know, when they try to answer this big question, why be moral, they will say, well, you should be moral because we all have this natural social feeling, natural feeling for other human beings that we have been inculcated to have since very young. But on the other side, you have other philosophers who say that it's not really about natural feeling or any of these things. It's really about who we are as you know, as individuals. So people like Immanuel Kant will say that you have to do your duty, you have to do the right thing, not because of any fellow feeling or anything like that, but because you are a rational being. And as a rational being, as a rational being, it behooves you. It is part of who you are that you should fulfill your duty. Okay, I'm going to write something down on the board, but before I do that, let me just take a picture of this first. Okay. So the big question, so if the big question is why be moral? You can say that in Western moral philosophy, there are kind of two major answers to this. So on the one side, you have people like Mill and Hume, who talk about, you know, this thing that they talk about social feeling or moral sentiment. So it's basically all about feeling. And on the other side, you have people like Kant and maybe a few other people who say things like it is really about your innate nature. It is about your rational nature. So you have to do the right thing, fulfill your duty, because if you don't do it, then you will sink. Now you will sink down to being like an animal. You will sink down to being a non-rational or irrational being. So you have to do the right thing because it is in your, it behooves, it will be unbecoming of you as a rational creature, as a rational being, not to do the right thing. Okay, how is it unbecoming? I don't really want to answer that question right now because I should leave this part to to when we talk about Kant. Okay, for right now, I kind of want to switch gears and get you to think about something else. So you might remember, right? You might remember that last week when we were in class, we were talking about Plato, and we were talking about that story in Plato about the magical ring that somebody got, and what one of the characters was saying was that if somebody were to get that kind of power using a magical ring, he wouldn't be able to resist doing all kinds of evil and antisocial things. Now, I want to ask, I kind of want us to think about this again. Is that really true? I mean, uh, Mill seems to think that as humans, we have this natural social feeling, right? We have this natural social feeling that causes us to naturally want to think about other people. So could it be? I'm just wondering. Could it be that even if you were to get that ring that allows you to become invisible and do whatever, you might still. Could it be that even if you were to get that kind of power, you might still be restrained by social feeling to act in other people's interests? Okay. I don't. I actually want to hear your answers. By to this thing as a as a group. So what I have done is I have come up with I have come up with a discussion question about this, and what I'm going to do. Uh, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is to break you into groups to think about this question. So if you are in Zoom, if you are taking this class from Zoom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the people who are in Zoom into. There's actually a number of people in Zoom today. Okay, I'm going to break you guys in Zoom into a breakout room, and then as for the people who are here in person, I'm going to I'm going to break you up into smaller groups. Okay, let me put this up on the screen first. Hopefully you can see this. Um, if you have a device like a laptop, you could also pull it up on that. Okay, so the question is basically this. Hold on. Why does it keep doing this? I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to get to the bottom of this thing, but it wouldn't allow me to. Oh, okay. Yeah, so the question is basically, would this deeply rooted social feeling prevent somebody from committing injustice against others if he had that magical ring that Gyges had? Explain your answer either way. Okay, so I would like you to get into groups and think about this answer. For those of you who are in Zoom, please stand by. I'll be putting you into the breakout room in a minute. But let me break the people here in groups first. So there are 5, 8, 11, 15, 17, 18, 22. Right. Let's try this. We'll try to break you up into 7 groups. Okay. So as when you get into your groups, again, just don't move any desks. Just go to go to the relevant desk. So take your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Okay, so let's see. I suppose maybe group 1 can gather around here, group 2 around here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. As for those of you in, so let's take about maybe 10 minutes to come up with an answer to this question as a group. And then for those of you in Zoom, I will break you up into the breakout room. Okay, how do I do this? What did you say it was? I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure it's two.
Yeah, well, maybe just not too.
I'm gonna forget.
What group are you guys? Four? And there are only a two of you.
Whatever you choose.
Yeah, so there's. So who else is in group 4 besides the two of you? Are you guys in group 4 too? Oh, okay. So it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
Group 4 and group 4. Yeah. Okay. How interesting. Maybe he needs to be here. You say you're in group 2, right? Who else is in group 2 here? No, it's okay. Stay there. Yeah, maybe, but perhaps you guys can, it's okay to, it's okay if there are two people, it's okay if there are only two people, you can still, have the discussion anyway. Okay, so let's start, the discussion. I'll reconvene us in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I can see, because the only reason I can see the first word is because, if you're seeing it just, then I can see where they are with this. Because they get everything they want, and everybody sees it as good. And that's the only reason I can see the first one. If they don't see it, you say it's like, there's like, I can see that one, but then I can also see like, some of the pinpoint areas that I know people that choose the first one be like that, but I know also people that have that quality,
I think in most cases, the experience of that people from communities and justices, moralities and stuff. But I guess it's like,
there's bad scientists will get to just like as high school reading. And he kills them, and then if they don't stop the acting, I think that's all the super example of like say that no one knew, and everybody thinks him as this great kid, and they still keep talking about it, almost just like this.
I guess if they're like maybe that would be
Maybe even the guilt stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think guilty, so I think guilty because you have this feeling like sounds like did it. So like
It's a real bad feeling you're like,
you're wrong, right? They have that guilty feeling, but then other people they wouldn't
so it really is. I totally would. I don't know, I totally would. I feel like you kind of depends on the person. Like you, out there to steal nothing. Me, you think I want to steal, I'm out totally steal. You know?
Another thing I was thinking is like,
Yeah, it's so big, it's not crazy. Because yeah, I know someone might use the power to really be a bad person or just be a good person. No, depends on the person. Yeah.
So everyone is, that's why it's sometimes so debated everybody that's what religion is, because you think that they're gonna go with more specificity.
Yeah. But you could be a touch and forget for yourself.
So it's just really helpful, right?
Zero and nine. Really, you want to use that nice chase it. I agree.
I missed the password to sign in to take attendance.
Oh. N1 MTWL.
Kind of depends on how much you killed that person to handle this certain things.
Okay.
Someone might be like this goes on. Some means a lot. Some they might be fine. They're like, oh, I don't care.
Okay. Let's reconvene. Okay, you stay where you are. Okay, I think the last time around, we didn't get to hear anything at all from the people in Zoom. So actually, I should summon them from where they are. Okay, hold on a second. I was going to start with at least hearing from the people in Zoom. Oops. Okay. So those of you in Zoom, I would like to start from by hearing about this question from you guys. Can one of you say, so what do you think of this question? Would this deeply rooted feeling prevent somebody from using the ring to commit injustice? What do you guys in Zoom think?
So we kind of all came to like a universal agreement that this social feeling, it's not really an objective fact that like pertains to every single individual. We think that it's like a subjective feeling. And so we think that it kind of depends. It's very circumstantial for if someone would commit an injustice with this ring, that's dependent on their social feeling.
Okay, so maybe you're saying that, so maybe the social feeling is stronger in some people and less strong in some others. And so whether or not they will use the ring to commit injustice will depend on whether the social feeling is strong or weak in that particular person.
Yeah, that's kind of what we all agreed on.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, Let's hear from the people here in the physical location. Are you guys good too? Okay, okay, what do you guys think?
If you're inside that, it depends on person to person. Some people would let that social skill stop them from including time, but some people would also just look past it, which anyway, so it's not stop them.
Okay, so it's not very different from the answer that we just got in a way. Depends from one person to the other. Okay, this is a good one. Yeah, what do you guys think?
Kind of just came to a consensus that maybe when it would stop every kind of bad deed, but there would be a moral line that most people would cross.
Yeah, and that moral, they wouldn't cross that moral line maybe because their upbringing or whatever it is has been strong enough to give them some kind of, I don't know what the right word is inhibition against that. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Thanks. I don't know what number this is, but the two of you are three.
So we thought that, like, in theory, this was a thing, right? It would, people wouldn't be able to do anything bad with it because they feel some guilty depending on the person.
So we talked about the social feeling just now, but we didn't say anything about guilt. So do you think that guilt? So maybe do you guys think that guilt is somehow maybe part of the social feeling?
If someone has that, they believe that's strong enough, then they could physically do anything because it's such, I guess it's rooted so deep in them that they would do it from doing this kind of thing.
Right. Do you think that would apply to? You guys think that would apply to most people or just maybe a group of people?
It would apply to a lot of people, but some people just probably don't care and do anything.
Yeah, interesting. Now those people who don't care, are these the people who are these the people who don't have guilt at all, or are these the people who somehow are able to like override the guilt or something?
I wouldn't say they have guilt at all, but I'd say like on some level they would feel guilty about some things that they do, depending on how bad it is.
Interesting. But they'll still do it anyway. I mean, they'll still do all those regular things anyway. Okay. Let's think about this now, but let's see what other people have to say. The theory.
Alright, so our answer was no, that social injustice wouldn't keep people away from making bad decisions. And so to back this up, there's a Japanese proverb that says everyone has three faces. The first face that they show is like normal society, the second face that they show to close friends and family, and the third face that they don't show to anyone. For example, if somebody wears an invisible ring, then that feels as if they have the more power to go away from being human itself and act outside of like the human social justice. For example, you can see that in great leaders. The more power that someone has, the more entitled that they feel into making decisions that they don't have to be justified for. And so when Gygas goes on and states that whenever someone has an invisible ring, they can act like God among themselves. So they don't have to feel human, so they can do anything like that doesn't categorize them to be human. And humans itself are self-interested in nature. Like humans are just self-interested in like whatever they want to do. For example, if someone is like self-interested, like even if they want to do like a little bit of good for themselves, it's just going to be animals. Like they want to do a little bit more good for themselves than they do for others. Underneath Mill's theory of util, it would still reign underneath the fact that there is no social justice. Just because that more power.
Interesting. So it sounds like maybe what will happen is that going back to the Japanese saying you were talking about, it sounds like you're saying that when somebody has that kind of power, the magical ring and the invisibility and all that, he wouldn't have to put on a public face at all. He will just show the face that nobody ever sees, or he will show the face that.
So what I'm stating is, yes, I agree with you right there. Like, you would just show the face that nobody would see. For example, why do we wear clothes when we go out to the public? It's because it's a social normality. You see everyone else wearing clothes. And that's the first face in like Japanese proverb as well. And another thing on top of it is, like, if you look a little bit deeper into what God was saying with the invisible ring, like, if somebody feels as if they don't be seen by other people, it feels as if like they don't have social injustice or morality that they have to hold up to.
Interesting. I was just going to say that, the question that occurred to me as you were talking is, would people still wear clothes if they were invisible, or, I'm sorry, that's not the right question. Okay, suppose, if you were in quarantine, if you were in quarantine and you don't have to face anybody except yourself, would you still wear clothes? I don't know. I mean, I could say that maybe you still would, right? Because clothes are not just, one could argue that wearing clothes is not just about what you present to the world. It's also an expression of your personality, right? Who you are. So maybe so maybe somebody, I'm not saying that it's right, but somebody could say to you, look, what if this public face that you present to other people is not just a must? What if it's also a part of who you are? And if this public face is kind of a part of who you are, maybe you will still continue to put on that public face, even if there is no public to worry about.
I guess that would kind of be preferential to wherever you are at the point. For example, a lot of people where they grow up, like different cultures and like places would have different views on what to wear, different like public face that they put out to be. So, and like cultural normality around itself with that would lead to whatever the decision of the person makes. For example, your example with like wearing clothes in quarantine, like normally, even if you're like at home itself, like the social normality of being at home itself, people like normally wear clothes even if they're at home. And that's what the face of social normality comes in.
Interesting. It sounds like we have three different views of I'm going to call it three different views of what's the name for this? Public morality. Okay, so the first view, the first view is okay. Actually, it should be the three different views of the origin of public morality. The first view is basically what we saw in Plato, or actually it's Glaucon who said this. And remember that Glaucon said that we only obey rules because we only obey rules because it's an agreement that people that the people agree to, because they don't have the power to do whatever they want to each other. So for Plato, right? Actually, Plato himself doesn't really believe it. For Glaucon actually believes that moral rules are just an agreement that people form because they are powerless. Because they are powerless to do whatever they want to each other. Okay. And then there is the second view, and then there's the one that Cran just brought up. I don't know what to call it. I'm just going to call it the Japanese face, the Japanese face view. Be careful about this, because I'm not actually saying that Japanese people believe this. I'm just saying that maybe some Japanese people do. And according to this view, right, moral rules, they are kind of as Cran would put it, they are kind of a public face that you put on to deal with the public. But then there is this. Then the third view is the Mill's view, which is and I think his view is that moral rules, they're not just an agreement. They are there because they moral rules. They express or reinforce our social feelings. So, another way of saying this is that moral rules are there because they express or reinforce who we are. And who we are is that, we are social beings. So I think the difference between these two views and this view is that these two views, they see moral rules as just as things that are imposed on you from the outside. Whether it's a public face that you put on, or whether it's a rule that you have to accept from outside because you are powerless to do anything else. So these two views basically see moral rules as things that are imposed on you from the outside, whereas this view is a bit more complicated because this view basically says that moral rules they're not just things that are imposed on you from the outside. They are things that you that you agree to because they help you to be a social being. They help you to be who you are, which is a social being. And so imagine Neil having a conversation with this guy, with the people who believe in the Japanese view. And Neil might say, "Look, are you really sure? Are you really sure that the public face that you put on is really? Are you sure it's just a mask? I mean, are you sure it's not just? Are you sure it's not also a part of who you are? Because as I said, if you still wear clothes, even though even when you are in quarantine, that might be that maybe the clothes express a certain part of who you are. I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't really decided who's right, which of these three views is right. But I'm saying that there are three different interesting ways of talking about what morality is about. And maybe, right? Maybe if you believe if you hold on to this third view, then you're much more likely to think that people won't do anything antisocial even when they have that ring, because being social is part of who you are. So even when you are alone, even when you are even when you have power over other people, there's a sense in which you are still a social creature. So yes, so there's a sense in which you are still a social creature. So that would put limits on on what kind of evil you can do to other people. Whereas maybe if you hold on to these two views, maybe you're more likely to believe that that if you have the ring, you will do anything you want to other people, because now that you are free from those rules, now that those rules are no longer shackling you, you will just do whatever. Okay. I think there are at least two groups that I've not heard from. So this is one group. Are you guys one group? Oh no, wait, sorry, it's the two of you. Okay, sorry, the two of you. What do you guys think?
I was kind of on their side with guilty conscience as a social feeling. For example, in like we brought up like the story Hamlet.
Oh.
He murdered the king, became the king, and was seen as justice and a good guy. However, his guilty conscience got to the best of him. Even though he had everything he wanted and people still looked up to him as a good guy, he still had the social feelings that he was wrong.
Yes, and in this case, his social feeling also encompasses those that are no longer living.
Yeah.
Because the ghost came back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, I do agree that some people's maybe the way they were raised would almost trick themselves into seeing what they're doing is wrong as justice. So if they had the invisible ring, they would do injustice, but due to the way they would draw it, like they've been raised, they would say, like they would tell themselves, just make themselves not feel guilty by convincing themselves that they're doing justice or it's not wrong.
So they will do evil things to other people, but they will maybe rationalize it.
Yeah.
Mm. So when they rationalize it,
Like just like with the Nazis, they rationalized it by saying the Jews weren't people.
yeah. So by doing this, they manage to convince themselves that they are still being social creatures. Interesting. Hmm. Yeah. Well, that just shows. I think that just shows that there's so many ways to be evil. You know, one way is to totally disregard social rules, social feelings, or whatever. But the other way is to kind of convince yourself that what you are doing is still social, even though maybe it's not. Interesting. Okay. Cool. Okay, let's move on to these guys. The four of you are one group, right? Okay, what do you guys think?
We talked a lot about like just the guilty feeling people would have and the way they were raised would stop them from committing like acts of injustices just because they would feel guilty later about it. But then we also talked about like if it was someone they didn't care about or someone they didn't have a personal connection with, that they might disregard those guilty feelings and still like go about that in acts of justice, like say, like trying to prove what they were doing is right because they didn't like that person or didn't care. Is what we talked about as well. So it just depends on the person and the way they were raised and why they were acting out.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I see that at least three groups have talked about guilt or guilty feeling, and so guilty feeling is a bad feeling that you get when you do something that you know is against the rules. It seems that in order to have a guilty feeling, the rule or the social feeling must be pretty deeply ingrained in you. Makes me wonder. So it makes me wonder if I don't know if a guilty feeling is a good thing or bad thing, but it makes me wonder, is guilt necessary in order to get people to behave themselves? Is guilt necessary in order for people to, be moral? Actually, this is an interesting question. Matt.
I don't think guilt is necessary, but it sure makes it easier because, like, you can either motivate people by getting them to want the right thing, or you can just get people to motivate people to not want the wrong thing.
Yeah, right. And the second part is where guilt comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a way to, sure. Yeah, it's a way to get people to not want the wrong thing. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. So, yeah, but that shows that if you can, if you can somehow get more people to be motivated to want the right thing, or want to be good, then you would have less need. You will have less need to to foster guilt in people. Interesting. I wonder, again, I wonder if, I wonder if a system of ethics that is based on rules is more likely to result in guilt in people than a system of ethics that is based on virtues. Um, because, you know, uh, because in a system of if a system of ethics is based on virtue, then it's about getting people to see what they can become if they cultivate certain habits in themselves, if they inculcate certain habits in themselves, right? Like remember during the first class we talked about things like all those self-help books like 7 Habits of Highly Successful People and all that. So the idea is to say, look, if you cultivate these habits, you will become successful, and all of these things, you'll become happy. It seems that in that case, there will be less need for guilt because you are not really guilting people into not doing certain things, but you are encouraging people to do all these things. Whereas in rules, whether we're talking about duty or whether we're talking about maximizing general happiness, it feels like it's a bit easier. It's easier to use rules as a kind of, as a clock to hit people over the head. So you can, so if you find somebody who's not not doing his duty, or if you find somebody who's not doing enough to maximize general happiness, then you say, you're not maximizing general happiness. You are, no, don't look at her. I'm just, okay, well, I can just point the screen. You're not maximizing general happiness. Therefore, you are bad. And then, you can see how that will make people feel bad and therefore guilty feeling. So yeah, I mean, it could, I don't know if this is true, but it could be that virtue theories, virtue ethics maybe leads to less guilt feeling than, than rule-based ethics. So yeah, something to think about. Is it 4:15 now? Oh yes, okay. I did better today. I heard from almost all the groups except maybe that group over there. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. And so remember that Tuesday is the writing assignment. So please bring a pen and a paper if you are going to get into class. Okay, thank you. I'll see you on Tuesday. Sorry, I didn't realize this is yours. Okay.